Hello, my people. I want to continue where I left off the other day when I was talking about Pharaoh and I was talking about the hail that came down and the plagues that were brought by the hand of Moshe and of Aaron. And the place that I left off is where I was speaking about Pharaoh. Anyway, here is where I'll start. And it says, Moses consented to do his will in regards to Pharaoh wanting the father to stop the plague of hail that had slain the beast. And it said, again, he begged Moses to supplicate the Most High on his behalf that he turned the plague away. And he promised to let the children of Yisreal go. Okay. I think I want to get just to have a little bit of music to go along with me as I read from this book. Let me turn it down so you won't be too distracted by this music. So it says, Moses consented to do his will, saying, however, think not that I do not know what will happen after the plague is stayed. I know that thou and thy servants, you will fear the Lord God once his punishment is removed, as little as you feared him before. But to show his greatness, I will pray to him to make the hail to cease. Now Moshe went a short distance out of the city from Pharaoh and spread abroad his hands unto the Most High. For he did not desire to pray to the Most High within, where there were many idols and images. At once, the hail remained suspended in the air. Part of it dropped down while Joshua was engaged in battle with the Amorites, and the rest the Most High will send down in his fury against God. He will send down in his fury against the descendants of the Roman Empire. Okay? And he will send down fire and brimstone in his fury upon all those who joined hand in hand with them. When you think about how they colonized and how the nations, Europeans, they cast lots for us. They split us up and they put us on those ships. And they carried us throughout the nations. Yeah. But anyway, I shall read it again. It says, part of it, we're talking about the hail. It says that once the hail remained suspended in the air, part of it dropped down while Joshua was engaged in battle with the Amorites, and the rest Yahweh will send down in his fury against God. Also, the thunders ceased at Moshe's intercession and were stored up for a later time, for they were the noise which the Most High made the host of the Syrians to hear at the siege of Samaria. Wherefore they arose and fled in the twilight. As Moses had foreseen, so it happened. No sooner had the hail stopped than Pharaoh abandoned his resolve and refused to let Yisreal go. And Moshe lost no time in announcing the eighth plague to him, the plague of the locusts. Now, observing that his words had made an impression upon the king's counselors, he turned and went out from Pharaoh to give them the opportunity of discussing the matter among themselves. And indeed, his servants urged Pharaoh to let the Israelites go and serve the Most High, their God. But again, when Moshe insisted that the whole people must go, the young and the old, the sons and the daughters, Pharaoh demurred, saying, "Now, I know it to be customary for young men and old men to take part in sacrifices, but surely not little children. And when you demand their presence too, you betray your evil purpose. It is but a pretense you're saying that you will go a 3 days journey into the wilderness and then return. You mean to escape and never come back. I will have nothing more to do with the matter. May God, Baal-Zephon, will oppose you in the way and hinder you on your journey." Pharaoh's last words were a dim presentiment. As a magician, he foresaw that on their going forth from Egypt, the children of Yisreal would find themselves in desperate straits before the sanctuary of Baal-Zephon. But Pharaoh was not content with merely denying the requests preferred by Moshe and Aaron. He ordered them to be forcefully expelled from the palace. Then the Most High sent the plague of the locusts, announced by Moshe before they ate every herb of the land and all the fruits of the trees that the hail had left, and there remained not any green thing. And again, Pharaoh sent for Moshe and Aaron to ask their forgiveness, both for his sins against the Most High God, in not having hearkened unto his words, and for the sins against them in having chased them forth and intended to curse them. Now, Moshe, as before, prayed to the Most High in Pharaoh's behalf, and his petition was granted. The plague was taken away, and in a rather surprising manner, when the swarms of locusts began to darken the land, the Egyptians caught them and preserved them in brim as a dainty to be eaten. Now, the Most High turned an exceeding strong west wind, which took up the locusts and drove them into the Red Sea. Even those they were keeping in their pots flew up and away, and they had none of the expected profit. The last plague but one, like those which had preceded it, endured 7 days. All the time the land was enveloped in darkness, only it was not always of the same degree of density. During the first 3 days, it was not so thick, but that the Egyptians could change their posture when they desired to do so. And if they were sitting down, they could rise up, and if they were standing, they could sit down. On the 4th, 5th, and 6th day, the darkness was so dense that they could not stir from their place. They either sat the whole time, or stood as they were at the beginning. So they remained until the end, the last day of darkness overtook the Egyptians, not in their own land, but at the Red Sea on their pursuit of Yisreal. The darkness was not of the ordinary earthly kind. It came from hell, and it could be felt. It was as thick as a dinar, Dinar, and all the time it prevailed. A celestial light brightened the dwellings of the children of Yisreal, whereby they could see what the Egyptians were doing under cover of the darkness. This was of great advantage to them, for when they were about to go forth from the land and they asked their neighbors to lend them raiment and jewels of gold and jewels of silver for the journey, the Egyptians tried to deny having any in their possessions. But the children of Israel, having spied out all their treasures during the days of darkness, could describe the objects they needed with accuracy and designate their hidden places. The Egyptians reasoned that the words of the Israelites could be taken implicitly as they spoke them. For if they had had an idea of deceiving them, asking for a loan when they intended to keep what they had laid hands on, they might have taken unobserved during the days of darkness whatever they desired. Hence, the Egyptians felt no hesitation in lending the children of Israel all the treasures they asked for. The darkness was of such a nature that it could not be dispelled by artificial means. The light of the fire kindled for household uses was either extinguished by the violence of the storm, or else it was made invisible and swallowed up in the density of the darkness. Sight, that most indispensable of all the external senses, though unimpaired, was deprived of its office. For nothing could be discerned, and all the other senses were overthrown like subjects whose leader was fallen. None was able to speak or to hear, nor could anyone venture to take food, but they lay themselves down in quiet and hunger, their outward senses in a trance. Thus they remained overwhelmed by the affliction until Moshe had compassion on them again and besought the Most High in their behalf, who granted him the power of restoring fine weather, light instead of darkness, and day instead of night. Intimidated by this affliction, Pharaoh permitted the people to go, the little ones as well as the men and the women. Only he asked that they let their flocks and their herds be stayed. But Moshe said, "As thou livest, our cattle also shall go with us. Yea, if but the hoof of an animal belongs to an Israelite, the beast shall not be left behind in Egypt." This speech exasperated Pharaoh to such a degree that he threatened Moses with death in the day he should see his face again. At this very moment, the Most High Yahweh appeared unto Moshe and bade him inform Pharaoh of the infliction of the last plague and slaying of the firstborn. It was the first and the last time that the Most High revealed himself in the royal palace. He chose the residence of Pharaoh on this occasion, that Moshe might not be branded as a liar, for he had replied to Pharaoh's threats of killing him if he saw his face again with the words, "Thou hast spoken well. I will see thy face again no more." With a loud voice, Moshe proclaimed the last plague, closing his announcement with the words, "And all these thy servants shall come down unto me, and bow down themselves unto me, saying, Get thee out, and all the people that follow thee. And after that I will go out." Moshe knew well enough that Pharaoh himself would come and urge him to lead Israel forth with a great haste as possible. But he mentioned only the servants of the king and not the king himself, because he never forgot the respect due to a ruler. The first Passover. When the time approached in which, according to the promise made to Abraham, his children would be redeemed, it was seen that they had no pious deeds to their credit, for the sake of which they deserved release from bondage. The Most High Yahweh therefore gave them two commandments, one bidding them to sacrifice the facial lamb, and one to circumcise their sons. Along with the first, they received the calendar in use among the Hebrews, for the Passover feast is to be celebrated on the 15th day of the month of Nisan, and with this month, the year is to begin. But the computations for the calendar are so involved that Moshe could not understand them until the Most High showed him the movement of the moon plainly. There were three other things equally difficult, which Moses could comprehend only after the Most High made him to see them plainly. They were the compounding of the holy anointing oil, the construction of the candlesticks in the tabernacle, and the animals, the flesh of which is permitted or prohibited. Also, the determination of new moon was the subject of special divine teachings, that Moshe might know the exact procedure. The Most High appeared to him in a garment with fringes upon its corners, bid Moshe stand at his right hand and Aaron at his left, and then citing Michael and Gabriel as witnesses, he addressed searching questions to the Malachim, the messengers, as to how the new moon had seemed to them. Then the Most High addressed Moshe and Aaron, saying, "Thus shall my children proclaim the new moon on the testimony of two witnesses and through the president of the court." When Moshe appeared before the children of Yisreal and delivered the divine message to them, telling them that their redemption would come about in this month of Nisan, they said, "How is it possible that we should be redeemed? Is not the whole of Egypt full of our idols? And we have no pious deeds to show, making us worthy of redemption." Moshe made reply and said, "As the Most High desires your redemption, he pays no heed to your idols. He passes them by, nor does he look upon your evil deeds, but only upon the good deeds of the pious among you." The Most High would not indeed have delivered Israel if they had not abandoned their idol worship. unto the purpose he commanded them to sacrifice the official lamb. Thus they were to show that they had given up the idolatry of the Egyptians, consisting in the worship of the ram. The early law was different from the practice of later time, for they were bidden to select their sacrificial animals 4 days before the day appointed for the offering, and to designate it publicly as such to show that they did not stand in awe of the Egyptians. With a heavy heart, the Egyptians watched the preparation of the Israelites for sacrificing the animals they worshiped, the ram. Yet they did not dare interpose an objection. And when the time came for the offering to be made, the children of Yisreal could perform the ceremonies without a tremor, seeing that they knew through many days' experience that the Egyptians feared to approach them with hostile intent. There was another practice connected with the slaughter of the official lamb that was to show the Egyptians how little the Israelites feared them. They took of the blood of the animal and openly put it on the 2 side posts and on the lintels of the doors of their houses. Moshe communicated the law regulating the Passover sacrifice to the elders, and they in turn made them known to the people at large. The elders were commended for having supported the leaders at his appearance, for their faith in Moshe caused the whole people to adhere to him at once. Therefore, the Most High spoke, saying, I will reward the elders for inspiring the people with confidence in Moshe. They shall have the honor of delivering Yisreal. They shall lead the people to the Passover sacrifice. And though this, the redemption will be brought about. Look behind me. The place that you see behind me is Mount Sinai, a very vast place indeed. One day I'll take the time to show you many pictures of this vast place, enough to hold and contain the host of us. The ceremony connected with the Passover sacrifice had been the purpose of conveying instructions to Yisreal about the past and the future alike. The blood put on the 2 side posts and the lintels of their door was to remind them of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And the bunch of hyssop for sprinkling the blood on the door was to imply that, although Yisrael's position among the peoples of the earth is as lowly as that of the hyssop among the plants, yet this little nation is bound together like the bunch of hyssop, for it is the Most High Yahweh's peculiar treasure. The official sacrifice afforded Moshe the opportunity for inducing the children of Israel to submit themselves to circumcision, which many had refused to do until then, in spite of his urgent appeals. But the Most High has means of persuasion. He caused a wind to blow that wafted the sweet scents of paradise towards Moshe, official lamb. And the fragrance penetrated to all parts of Egypt to the distance of 40 days' journey. The people were attracted in crowds to Moshe's lamb and desired to partake of it. But he said, "This is the command of the Most High. No uncircumcised person shall eat thereof." And they all decided to undergo circumcision. When the Most High passed through the land of Egypt, he blessed every Israelite for his fulfillment of the two commands, the command of the official sacrifice and the command regarding circumcision. The Most High performed a great miracle for the Israelites, as no sacrifice may be eaten beyond the borders of the Holy Land. All the children of Yisreal were transported thither on clouds, and after they had eaten of the sacrifices, they were carried back to Egypt in the same way. The smiting of the firstborn. When Moshe announced the slaying of the firstborn, the designated victims all repaired to their fathers and said, "Whatever Moshe has foretold has been fulfilled. Let the Hebrews go, else we shall all die." But the fathers replied, "It is better for one of every 10 of us to die than the Hebrews should execute their purpose." Then the firstborn repaired to Pharaoh to induce him to dismiss the children of Yisreal. So far from granting their wish, he ordered his servants to fall upon the firstborn and beat them, to punish them for their presumptuous demands. Seeing that they could not accomplish their end by gentle means, they attempted to bring it about by force. Pharaoh and all that opposed the wishes of the firstborn were of the opinion that the loss of so inconsiderable an percentage of the population was a matter of small moment. They were mistaken in their calculations, for the divine decree included not only the firstborn sons, but also the firstborn daughters, and not only the firstborn of the marriages then existing, but also the firstborn issuing from previous alliances of the fathers and the mothers. And as the Egyptians led desolate lives, it happened not rarely that each of the 10 children of one woman was the firstborn of its fathers. Finally, the Most High decreed that death should smite the oldest member of every household, whether or not he was the firstborn of his parents. What Yahweh resolves is executed. At the exact instance marking the middle of the night, so precious that the only God himself could determine and discern, he appeared in Egypt, attended by 9,000 myriads of the angels of destruction, who are fashioned, some of hail and some of flames, and whose glances drive terror and trembling to the heart of the beholder. These angels, Malachim, were about to precipitate themselves into the work of annihilation. But Yahweh restrained them, saying, "My wrath will not be appeased until I myself execute vengeance upon the enemies of Israel." Yes, our Father, he shall execute vengeance upon God. The Those among the Egyptians who gave credence to Moshe's words and tried to shield their firstborn children from death sent them to their Hebrew neighbors to spend the fateful night with them, in the hope that the Most High would exempt the houses of the children of Yisreal from the plague. But in the morning, when the Israelites arose from their sleep, they found the corpse of the Egyptian fugitives next to them. That was the night in which the Israelites prayed before lying down to sleep. Cause us, O Yahweh, our Father, to lie down in peace. Remove Satan from hence us, from before us and from behind us, and guard our going out and our coming in unto life and unto peace. For it was Satan that had caused frightful bloodshed among the Egyptians. Among the slain there were, besides the Egyptian firstborn, also the firstborn of other nationalities residing in Egypt, as well as the Egyptians' firstborn dwelling outside of their own land. Even the long dead of the firstborn were not spared. The dogs dragged their corpse out of their graves in the houses, for it was the Egyptian custom to inter the dead at home. At the appalling sight, the Egyptians mourned as though the bereavement had befallen them but recently. The very monuments and statues erected to the memory of the firstborn dead were changed into dust, which was scattered and flew out of sight. Moreover, their slaves had to share the fate of the Egyptians, and no less the firstborn of the captives that was in the dungeons, for none was so low. But he hated the Hebrews as they hate us now. So they hated the Hebrews, and they rejoiced when the Egyptians decreed their persecutions. The female slaves that ground corn between millstones were in the habit of saying, "We do not regret our servitude, if only the Yisraelites are gagged too." In dealing out punishments to these aliens in the land of Egypt, the Most High Yahweh showed that he was at once the master of the land and the Lord over all the gods of the nations. For if the slaves and the captives of war had not been smitten, they would have said, "Mighty is our God who helped us in this plague." For the same reason, all the idols of the Egyptians were swept out swept out of existence in that night. The stone idols were ground into dust. The wooden idols rotted, and those made of metal melted away. And so the Egyptians were kept from ascribing their chastisements to the wrath of their own gods. Likewise, the Most High, Yahweh, slew the firstborn of the cattle. For the Egyptians paid worship to animals, and they would have attributed their misfortune to them. In all these ways, the Most High showed them that their gods were but vanity. The redemption of Yisreal from Egyptian bondage. Pharaoh rose up in the night of the smiting of the firstborn. He waited, not for the third hour of the morning, when kings usually arise, nor did he wait to be awakened, but he himself roused his slaves from their slumber and all the other Egyptians, and together they went forth to seek Moshe and Aaron. He knew that Moshe had never spoken an untruth, And as he had said, I will see thy face again no more. He could not count upon Moshe coming to him. There remained nothing for him to do but go in search of the Yisraelitish leader. He did not know where Moshe lived, and he had great difficulty and lost much time in looking for his house. For the Hebrew lads of whom he made inquiry, when he met them in the streets, played practical jokes on him, misdirected him, and led him astray. Thus he wandered about a long time, all the while weeping and crying out, "Oh, my friend Moshe, pray for me to God." Meanwhile, Moshe and Aaron and all Israel besides were at the official meal, drinking wine as they sat and leaned to one side and singing songs and praises of God, the Hallel, which they were the first to recite. When Pharaoh finally reached the door of the house wherein Moshe abode, he called to him, and from Moshe the question came back, who art thou, and what is thy name? I am Pharaoh, who stands here humiliated. Moses asked again, why doest thou come to me thyself? Is it the custom of kings to linger at the doors of common folk? I praise thee, my Lord, returned Pharaoh. Come forth and intercede for us, else there will not remain a single being in Egypt. I may not come forth, and then Moses said, I may not come forth, for God hath commanded us, none of you shall go out of the door of his house until the morning. But Pharaoh continued to plead, do but step to the window and speak to me. And when Moses yielded to his importunities and appeared at the window, the king addressed these words to him. Thou didst say yesterday, all the firstborn in the land of Egypt will die. But now as many as 9/10 of the inhabitants have perished. Pharaoh was accompanied by his daughter, Bethiah, Moshe's foster mother. She reproached him with ingratitude and having brought down evil upon her and her countrymen. And Moshe answered and said, 10 plagues the Most High brought upon Egypt. Has evil occurred to thee from any of them? Did one of them affect thee? And when Bethiah acknowledged that no harm had touched her, Moshe continued to speak. Although thou art thy mother's firstborn, thou shalt not die, and no evil shall reach thee in the midst of Egypt. But Bethiah said, of what advantage is my security to me when I see the king, my brother, and all his household and his servants in this evil plight, and look upon their firstborn perishing with all the firstborn of Egypt? And Moshe returned, verily, thy brother and his household and the other Egyptians would not hearken to the words of the Most High. Therefore did this evil come upon them. Turning to Pharaoh, Moshe said, in spite of all that hath happened, I will teach thee something. If thou desire to learn, and thou wilt be spared, and thou wilt not die, raise thy voice and say, you children of Israel, you are your own masters. Prepare for your journey and depart from among my people. Hitherto, you were the slaves of Pharaoh, But henceforward, you are under the authority of the Most High. Serve the Lord your God. Moshe made him say these words 3 times. And the Most High caused Pharaoh's voice to be heard throughout the land of Egypt, so that all the inhabitants, the homeborn, and the aliens knew that Pharaoh had released the children of Israel from the bondage in which they had languished. And all Israel sang, Hallelujah. Praise, O you servants of the Most High. Praise the name of the Most High, Yahweh. For they belong to the Most High, and no more were the servants of Pharaoh. Now the king of Egypt insisted upon their leaving the land without delay. But Moshe objected and said, are we thieves that we should slink away under cover of night? Wait until morning. Pharaoh, however, urged and begged Moshe to depart, confessing that he was anxious about his own person, for he was a firstborn son, and he was terrified that death would strike him down too. Moshe dissipated his alarm, though he substituted a new horror with the words, fear not, there is worse in store for thee. Dread seized upon the whole people. Every one of the Egyptians was afraid of losing his life. And they all united their prayers with Pharaoh's and begged Moshe to take the Israelites hence. And the Most High spake, you shall all find your end, not here, but in the Red Sea. The Exodus. Pharaoh and the Egyptians let their dead lie unburied, while they hastened to help the Israelites load their possessions on wagons to get them out of the land with as little delay as possible. When they left, they took with them, beside their own cattle, the sheep and the oxen that Pharaoh had ordered his nobles to give them as presents. The king also forced his magnates to beg pardon of the Israelites for all they had suffered, knowing as he did that God forgives an injury done by man to his fellow only after the wrongdoer has recovered the goodwill of his victim by confessing and regretting his fault. Now depart, said Pharaoh to the Israelites. I want nothing from you but that you should pray to God for me, that I may be saved from death. My man was scared. The hatred of the Egyptians toward the Israelites changed into its opposite. They conceived affection and friendship for them, and fairly forced raiments upon them, and jewels of silver, and jewels of gold to take along with them on their journey, although the children of Israel had not yet returned the articles they had borrowed from their neighbors at an earlier time. This action is in part to be explained by the vanity of Pharaoh and his people. They desired to pretend before the world that they were vastly rich, as everybody would conclude when this wealth of their mere slaves were displayed to observers. Indeed, the Israelites bore so much away from Egypt that one of them alone might have defrayed the expense of building and furnishing the tabernacle. On their leaving the land, only the private wealth of the Egyptian was in their hands. But when they arrived at the Red Sea, they came into possession of the public treasure. 2. For Pharaoh, like all kings, carried the money of the state with him on his campaigns in order to be prepared to hire a relay of mercenaries in case of a defeat. Great as the other treasures was, the booty captured at the sea far exceeded it. But if the Israelites loaded themselves down with goods and jewels and money, it was not to gratify love of riches, or as any usury might say, because they coveted their neighbor's possessions. In the first place, they could look upon their plunder as wages due to them from those they had long served. And secondly, they were entitled to retaliate on those at whose hands they had suffered wrong. Check that out. I think there's a debt to pay. I know there's a debt to pay. All those descendants whose ancestors made money off of us and passed the wealth down, they have to pay a debt, and that debt has not been paid. May I continue? Even then, they were requiting them with an affliction far slighter than any one of all they had endured themselves. The plagues did not stay the cruelty of the Egyptians' oppressors toward the Hebrews. It continued unabated until the very end of their sojourn in the land. On the day of the Exodus, Rachel, the daughter of Bethuel, gave birth to a child. And while she and her husband together were treading the clay for bricks, the babe dropped from her womb into the clay and sank out of sight. And Gabriel appeared, molded a brick out of the clay containing the child, and carried it to the highest of the heavens, where he made it a footstool before the divine throne. In that night, it was that the Most High looked upon the suffering of Israel and smote the firstborn of the Egyptians. And it is one of the 4 nights that the Most High has inscribed in the book of memorial. The first of the 4 is that in which the Most High appeared to create the world. All was waste and void, and darkness brooded over the abyss, until the Most High came and spread light around about by his word. The second night is that in which the Most High appeared unto Abraham at the covenant of the pieces. In the third night, he appeared in Egypt, slaying the firstborn of the Egyptians with his right hand, and protected the firstborn of the Israelites with his left. And my people, the 4th night recorded will be that in which the end of the redemption will be accomplished, when the iron yoke of the Roman Empire, that wicked kingdom, will be broken, and all the evildoers and their descendants will be destroyed. Then will Moshe come from the desert, and the Messiah from Rome, each at the head of his flock. And the word of the Most High will mediate between them, causing both to walk with one accord in the same direction. Yisreal's redemption in future days will happen on the 15th of Nisan. That's our second Exodus. The night of Yisreal's redemption from Egypt. For thus did Moshe say, in this night Yahweh protected Yisreal against the angels of destruction. And in this night he will also redeem the generation of the future. Through the actual deliverance from Egypt took place in that night. The Hebrews did not leave the land until the following day. During the same night, the Most High requited the Egyptians for their evil deeds in the sight of all the people, the night being as bright as day at the time of the summer solstice. Not one could escape the general chastisement, for by divine dispensation, none was absent from home at the time, so that none could fail to see the chastisement. The angels in heaven learned what was happening on earth when they were about to begin their songs of praise to the Most High. He silenced them with the words, "My children on earth are singing now." And the celestial hosts had to stop and listen to the songs of Yisreal. Great as the joy of the Hebrews was at their deliverance from the Egyptian bondage, it was exceeded by that of Pharaoh's people at seeing their slaves depart. For with them went the dread of death that had obsessed them. They were like the portly gentleman riding an ass. The rider feels uncomfortable and longs for the moment of alighting, but his longing cannot compare in intensity with that of the ass groaning under the corpulent burden. And when their journey's end is reached, the ass rejoices more than his master. So the Egyptians were happier to be rid of the Hebrews than they were to be free. In general, the Israelites were not in a joyous mood. The strength of men is readily exhausted mentally and physically by the strain of a sudden change from slavery to freedom. They did not recover vigor and force until they heard the angel host sing songs of praise and joy over the redemption of Yisreal and the redemption of the Shekinah. For so long as the chosen people is in exile, the Shekinah who dwells among Yisreal, the Hebrews, is also, as it were, in exile. At the same time, the Most High caused the earth to exhale and send aloft a healing fragrance, which cured them all their diseases. It cured all their diseases. The exodus of the Israelites began at Ramses, and although the distance from there to the city of Mazrim, where Moshe abode, was a 40 days journey, yet they heard the voice of their leader urging them to leave the land. They covered the distance from Ramses to Succoth, a 3 days march, in an instant. Then Succoth, the Most High enveloped them in 7 clouds of glory, 4 hovering in front, behind, and at the 2 sides of them, one suspended above them to keep off rain, hail, and the rays of the sun, and one under them to protect them against thorns and snakes. The 7th cloud preceded them and prepared the way for them, exalting the valleys and making low every mountain and hill. Thus they wandered through the wilderness for 40 years. In all that time, no artificial lighting was needed. A beam from the celestial cloud followed them into the darkness of chambers, and if one of the people had to go outside of the camp, even thither he was accompanied by a fold of the cloud, covering and protecting him. Only that a difference might be made between day and night. A pillar of fire took the place of the cloud in the evening. Never for an instant were the people without the one or the other to guide them. The pillar of fire glowed in front of them before the pillar of cloud retired, and in the morning the cloud was there before the fire vanished. The clouds of glory and the pillar of fire were sent for the protection of Yisreal alone, for none beside, not for the heathen and not for the mixed multitude that went up with them. These had to walk outside of the cloud enclosure. The cavalcade consisted of 600,000 heads of families afoot, each accompanied by 5 children on horseback, and to these must be added the mixed multitude exceeding the Hebrews vastly in number. So profound was Yisrael's trust in the Most High that they followed Moshe unmurmuringly into the wilderness. Without supplying themselves with provisions, the only edibles they took were the remains of the unleavened bread and the bitter herbs, and these not to satisfy their hunger, but because they were unwilling to separate themselves from what they had prepared lovingly at the command of the Most High. These possessions were so dear to them that they would not entrust them to the beast of burden. They carried them on their own shoulders. And I will have to continue this story next time. This is Dana Tate signing off. Until we meet again.